We're back with Five Guys in a Bible, and it's good to be back again. And tonight we're attempting to answer anyway, a question about the Sabbath. That is when is the Sabbath? Is it a Saturday? Is it a Sunday? Is it another day? And what are we responsible to do? All kinds of good questions wrapped up in a Sabbath question. So we're going to start with Troy McGahan.
Well, the question is there a Sabbath? If so, what's the day? Let me say that there's a lot of people out there today that have the idea that they are keeping the Sabbath. Okay, let me say, first of all, I appreciate what they're saying they're doing. I have no doubt that they think they're keeping the Sabbath. But there is no Sabbath today. Because this is the thing, if you kept things under the law, like it was in the Old Testament, then what you're going to have is and I'm, giving some general parameters here, but like myself, I pastor Friendship Baptist Church in Appomattox, Virginia. I drive approximately 7 miles to church every Sunday. If Sunday was the Sabbath, as some people say, then I'm breaking the law. Because if I'm not mistaken, it was something like half mile or an equivalent to half mile to a mile. You weren't allowed to travel away from your house. They didn't even start fires on the Sabbath to cook. They did all their cooking the day before. Yet, a lot of us, and I'm talking about myself at one time even, we would say, well, you know what, we're not going to go out to eat on Sunday, or the Sabbath, as we might say. But however, we would go home, and while we may not stoke a fire, what we would do is we'd go home and we'd cook dinner. I mean, it's just a lot of inconsistency. Now, but I think the principle we have today, and I'm going to let these other brethren kind of really get into this, it's not a Sabbath day, it is the Lord's day. But it is a principle that we set aside, in it being the Lord's day, that it is something that we are to worship on. It is a day that if you can, you should be able to rest, be able to relax. But as far as being a Sabbath day, absolutely not. It's the Lord's day. And being as it is the Lord's day, first and foremost what we need to do is we need to set that aside as a day of worship and bringing honor and glory to God and learning more of Him and resting in Him rather than the day. So I'll pass it on and let these other brethren really expound on what it means to be either the Lord's day or Sabbath day or not a Sabbath day. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us over to Todd Bryant.
Troy just says that because he plays golf every Sunday morning before church, so he had to say that. I made that up for people at Friendship Baptist. That's not true. I agree with Troy. I do not think we are under any Sabbath laws today, but there's a reason for that. Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 says, "Let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink or regard to a festival or a new moon." Now, I think everybody probably that's listening to this so far would say we're not under any of those type laws. But that sentence ends by saying, or a Sabbath. And he goes on and says, "These are a shadow of things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ." I believe Christ fulfilled the Sabbath. I believe He fulfilled the entire law. The Sabbath law in particular is that rest that Hebrews chapter 4 talks about when it says that there is a rest now that remains for the children of God. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 6. I believe Jesus is our Sabbath. And I believe we really miss one of the great blessings that Jesus fulfilled all the types and shadows of the law when we put ourselves back under those things that He's fulfilled, and we now rest in His own work. We don't rest in what we do.
All right, that takes us over then to Jason.
It's so interesting to me. One of the, I think the biggest controversy that you find in Jesus' ministry in the Gospels is this struggle about Sabbath law between him and his disciples on one hand and the Pharisees and Sadducees, especially the Pharisees on the other hand, because the Pharisees had this weird idea that they were doing God a favor by maintaining these ridiculous Sabbath rules that they set up. They didn't just follow what the Bible said about don't do any work on the Sabbath, but they went about trying to define in this minute detail what counts as work. Right? You say don't work. Well, what counts as work? Well, we need to set this out in rules. So they had these silly rules that if you were dragging, if you moved your chair and a leg of the chair drug across the ground, you just broke the Sabbath because you plowed. Okay? If you left the window open and the wind blows in on the Sabbath day and it blows out a candle, that was work in your house because the candle was extinguished. I love the one, if you plucked a gray hair on the Sabbath, that was considered reaping. You had just broken the Sabbath. And you couldn't trim your fingernails. Right? You couldn't trim your fingernails on the Sabbath day, and you couldn't do it on Wednesday evening or Thursday morning, because if you did, they thought they would start to grow again on the Sabbath day, and that was breaking the Sabbath law. So they had all these ridiculous rules set up. But what Jesus did was delivered this earth-shattering truth to them. In Mark chapter 2, verse 27, it says, he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. In other words, God gave the Sabbath for our benefit, not making us for the Sabbath's benefit, which is the way the Pharisees thought. They're somehow doing God a favor, right? So I agree with Todd where he says Jesus is our Sabbath. Jesus kept the whole law. At the same time, I think we go back to the Old Testament law and we understand there are principles there. There are reasons why God established those things. And so what Jesus describes is a Sabbath was created for our benefit. It's having a day of rest is good for our physical well-being. It's good for our mental well-being. It's good for our spiritual condition. We need a time of rest and relaxation from the physical and emotional drain of work. Now, the Pharisees had taken that blessing of rest and had made the Sabbath a day of worrisome fretting about every kind of detail. I mean, it was no longer restful. Now, you could not imagine the Sabbath in their day thinking that's a day of rest. It's a day of worry, right, of how you're going to violate the Sabbath. And for those people who say today that we're keeping the Sabbath, we can run into the same danger today, right? Because the natural tendency is to say, well, if we're keeping the Sabbath, here's all the rules that you need to set up in order to maintain the Sabbath. And we forget the principle that Jesus laid down, that the Sabbath was made for our benefit, not the other way around. Okay. As far as the day of the Sabbath is, you know, it's clear that it would have been Saturday in the Old Testament, but it's also clear in the New Testament that Christians began worshiping on the first day of the week. You see that in Acts chapter 20. You see it in 1 Corinthians 16. You see it all over the place. But I would just encourage you to think of the principle that's involved there, because Jesus clearly backs up the principle of it's for our benefit. It does something good for us.
All right, very good. That brings it to me then. I think, wow, I'm actually a little bit surprised on this topic that everybody here so far has agreed, and I don't know what Mark will say, but because it seems as if we do seem to have a lot of people who are Baptists that glorify. I'll let you talk in a minute, Mark.
I'm going to say what John Gill says.
Oh, brother. But it seems if we have a lot of Baptists who want to put, make Sunday the Sabbath somehow, and the Bible just really never gives us that as anywhere that the Sabbath has ever moved or, but here's the fear, and people try to say, well, it's the Lord's Day and we should honor it like a Sabbath day of rest, and they want to start making rules of what a Christian can and cannot do on a Sunday. And whereas I believe it is a day that we should magnify the Lord, I'm not going to sit down and make a set of rules of things that you should or shouldn't do. That's not my job to do that, and it's not your job to do it on somebody else either. So if somebody goes and gets a haircut after church, it's not your job to call them out on it and say, you've broken a great law by getting a haircut on a Sunday when you stopped at the store to get your chicken to go home and fry. That's the kind of thing that we see, and it's wrong. Anybody that thinks that they keep a Sabbath is severely mistaken. I have had some opportunities to spend some time in some Jewish homes on the Sabbath, and it is amazing the care that they actually put into doing things, the preparation that takes place. The light bulbs are unscrewed in the refrigerator because you can't open up the refrigerator and have the light click on, because that's doing work. If there's a lid on the trash can, it has to be raised in the raised position all the time, because lifting it is doing work. There's so many things that a person can and can't do on the Sabbath, and then when we have Baptists say that they keep the Sabbath, it's kind of a laugh in a way, because we're not even close to it. Not even close. Even if you go to church 2 or 3 times on Sunday, you're still not going to come close to what the way that the Sabbath was celebrated. But with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mark.
Well, most everyone has kind of talked about what I was going to talk about. I even was going to get into the naming of the days and how that the days of the week are named after pagan gods, and I was going to get into the first day of the week. It's interesting that the only day of the week that's mentioned is the Sabbath day. The other one, it does say upon the first day of the week, and how that is when you're to give your offerings is on the first day of the week. So it is kind of obvious that the early church did meet on the first day of the week. But after listening to everyone else, and they've covered this topic well, the thought that comes to my mind, there is no doubt that we're not under Sabbath laws, and we can't keep the law at all. But thinking about, why is this an issue? Why do people want to say that we need to observe Sunday as the Sabbath? And I think that a lot of us, our minds go back to a time when we lived in a simpler time, and we lived in a time when our country was a God-fearing country. And I remember as a boy that there were no stores open on Sunday. I remember as a boy, if you was going to go to church, you wanted to make sure you had gas in your vehicle on Saturday night, because you couldn't stop at a gas station on Saturday or on Sunday and get gas. You couldn't go to a restaurant in some places. Just whenever I was a boy is when the restaurants started opening up. You couldn't stop at the grocery store, and everyone spent the day, even people who weren't saved, honored the day Sunday. There were no sports activities or practices or all of that. And so there was a time when our country was more God-fearing and people had more respect for the things of God. And it seemed like as people quit respecting Sunday as God's day, it was just sort of a picture of how we lost respect for God in our everyday lives. And I think that's why people make this such an issue. It's kind of a picture of what's going on in people's lives. And so that's why they're so it seems to be such a huge issue. And so I think what has happened is we have lost a respect for the day, Sunday, that most people worship on the first day of the week, and it's sort of a picture of what's in our society, and that's why it's such a huge issue. But as far as, are we commanded? No, we're not commanded. Are we keeping the Sabbath? No. Did the early church meet on the first day of the week, which was Sunday? Yes. Should we go to church? Should that be a day when we honor God? Yes. But are those other laws tied to it? No. But we do need to make sure that we do continue to honor God with our lives and with our time and with bring our offerings and all of those things. We should do that on Sunday. Even in my early days in the Baptist church, there's just as much pressure on Wednesday night as there is on Sunday and Sunday night. If you don't have church on Sunday night, if you don't go to church on Sunday night, then you're a heretic. You're lost if you don't go to church on Sunday night. And if you miss church on Wednesday night, it's a horrible thing. And so, that's kind of the things that you've seen, and there's a lot of legalism put into all of that. And listen, I think it's just important that we do honor the Lord's day, and it happens to be the first day of the week, in my opinion. So I've really rattled on, so I'll just shut it down right there and let these other guys continue to make their other comments.
I don't have anything else to say.
Go ahead, Jason.
All right. Well, let's say goodbye. And
Bye.
glad Troy made it back to say goodbye. And we hope this answered the question. And
I'm
hope
smiling.
to see you again. God bless y'all.